other, and I think it's up to people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Indeed. And hello and welcome to the Doin' Time show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. This is Marissa, and Peter and I will be taking you through until 5 o'clock this evening. Hi, Pete.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, and we'll be speaking first up with Joseph Pugliese. And Joseph, listeners may recall, was with us when we did the special memorial show recently in April to honour the anniversary of the passing of Uncle Ray Jackson. And Joseph has also done some wonderful work with Ray, but also helping to build the movement to stop Aboriginal deaths in custody. And today with Joseph, we're going to be speaking about David Dungay, who died in custody, and indeed he died in prison, and there was a lot of alleged negligence from guards, and Joseph will be speaking about an inquest, or the inquest, and they're putting the information on hold for another year, all the findings, but anyway, we'll be speaking with him very soon about that inquest. He was actually physically there, and he's going to be also giving us some background about David Dungay as well, Aboriginal death in custody. Then after that, we'll be speaking with Chris Breen, who is an activist from the Refugee Action Collective. And Chris will be speaking about and giving a report back on a Melbourne action which occurred at Jetstar corporate office, and in regards to some terrible goings-on and atrocities where they were deporting refugees and asylum seekers on Qantas. So without any further ado, we're now going to be speaking with Joseph Pugliese from New South Wales. Hello, Joseph.
Line 5.
Not sure what happened there. We'll just had a few technical difficulties there.
Want me to get it for you?
There we go. Try again. Hello, Joseph. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Hi, Marissa, and hi, Peter.
Hi, Joyce.
Take two, eh?
Indeed. It's good to be back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, Joseph. And wondering if you could talk a little bit about what happened at the inquest, and share with us some background and some of your eyewitness views on the David Dungay inquest.
Sure. Well, look, I attended the inquest during the full 10 days for two reasons. One, as a member of ISJA, the Indigenous Social Justice Association,
Good. Yep.
To show my support to the Dungay family, because I well understood that this would be a really trying time for them, but didn't quite realise how trying it would be, and we'll speak more about that at the end. And two, because I was covering the daily proceedings of the inquest as much as I could, because there were a number of areas where I couldn't speak because the information was suppressed. So I'm circumscribed in terms of what I can actually say. But I was covering the inquest also for the project that I've mentioned to you before, Deathscapes, which examines both Indigenous deaths in custody and refugee and asylum seeker deaths in custody and at the border, because we see the two related. As I've mentioned to you before, we see the two related because we see the settler states exercise violent sovereignty at the border and refugee deaths as basically an attempt to legitimate their theft, their expropriation of Indigenous sovereignty, because actually it's Indigenous nations who should decide who comes to this country and on what terms. If you get my meaning.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you've got a refugee activist coming on after me, because I see the two issues as the Deathscapes project does, as intimately connected.
Yes, I was just having a look at that Deathscape's website. It's excellent.
Thank you. Well, look, I'm happy to talk about the David Dungay inquest. So I'm happy to get guidance from you in terms of what you would like me to unfold.
Well, really, we wanted to use the example of David Dungay, and it's horrible that we have to have him as an example. I mean, the death could have been prevented if there had been a medical duty of care. But we wanted to explore with you, Joseph, today the infrastructural racist violence of the settler state and the fatal and ongoing effects on Australia's Indigenous people. And the best way that perhaps we could tackle that is to look at the evidence that emerged at the inquest and try to talk about that as best you can.
Sure. Well, look, I think what was really disturbing for me in terms of the evidence that unfolded and stuff that I can talk about because it's on the public record was that David early on had what we would call early onset psychosis. So at about 15 he had his first episode, but he wasn't properly diagnosed even though he was taken into emergency and people could see that he was hallucinating, he was hearing voices, etc. So I guess what was so disturbing was that at that early stage he wasn't properly diagnosed, he wasn't given the proper medical care, and it set him off, like a lot of people who suffer serious mental health issues. It drove him to self-medication with illicit substances, etc., etc. And I can talk about that from a personal position too, because my son had early onset psychosis at 13. Yeah. And it's when they're not properly diagnosed, it really sends them off into a spiral where they get ensnared by the criminal justice system. They go into areas where they take substances, so they make themselves vulnerable to being criminalised because of their undiagnosed mental health issues. So already there was a really fraught background that made David, one, as someone with what we would say mental disability, mental health issue disability, vulnerable. Overlay that with the racialised dimension, the structural racism against Indigenous people, and the systemic neglect to get their medical issues in particular addressed, whether in the criminal justice system or out of it. And out of it, we can talk about, the Ms. Do case, which I know you marked last week.
Yes. Yep.
And the way, for example, in which she was suffering grievous illness. Yep. And she was actually trundled off to hospital, left in a wheelchair, and people, the nurses, the medical staff thought she was faking her symptoms effectively. And, of course, a few hours later, she died. So that crosses genders there, and what comes into clear focus is the racism which discounts, which delegitimises Indigenous people's serious health issues and the way that there is a duty of care that white people, for example, get in the health system that Indigenous people don't. So you can see how complex and large the picture is in terms of these breaches of duty of care due to racialised assumptions about Indigenous people.
Absolutely, and in fact, last week, Joseph, we paid tribute to Miss Dew and, read some material and actually spent quite some time on the show talking about what happened and looking at that inquest that was on public record.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious to know, because I was having a look at some of the dispatches on the Deathscape website where you were there. What are we allowed to have a talk about the coroner's findings?
Well, no, the coroner hasn't handed down his findings. Derek Lee hasn't handed down his findings, and really, this is what was so distressing about coming to the end of 10 days of the coronial inquest, and that was that we would have hoped, the Dungay family would have hoped, and Latona in particular, that things had been wrapped up, all the witnesses had presented their testimony, their evidence had been recorded, and so the coroner could go away and write up his findings. In fact, what happened was that they ran out of time. They underestimated the time it would take to bring for all the witnesses to give evidence. And at the end of day 9, when they realised they'd run out of time, there was no attempt made to rejig the timetable. And basically they said they were going to suspend the inquest and reconvene it in a year's time. Now, as you can imagine, it was about 3 in the afternoon when that bombshell dropped. The family just went into uproar at the prospect of having already waited 2.5 years for this inquest to come to court, and then to be told that they needed to wait another year. That's 3.5 years to actually finalise the evidence, and then, of course, it will take months for the coroner to write up his findings.
Yeah, I just had a look here, actually, Joseph, and it says they're resuming in June 2019, right?
That's right. That's right. And look, one of the Dungay family members basically broke protocol and shouted out in court, well, in another year's time, another Black Death will have occurred.
Yeah.
Because none of the recommendations have been framed, and, of course, none of the recommendations have been implemented. And there are so many recommendations already as a layperson that I can see urgently need to be taken away from what happened to David in the course of his maltreatment, violent maltreatment in the hands of correctional services there.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And I'm happy to speak about some of that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, when you look at what happened to David and the reason why he died, this is what's incredibly shocking. It hinges on a packet of biscuits. Yeah. Now, I know that sounds comical and absurd, but that's the fact. David was a diabetic. He often got food from some of the vending machines there and would take it back to his cell. Now, the other thing that the family wanted the council assisting the family to put on record was that David would often complain that he wasn't getting enough food in the prison system and that he was hungry for other food. So, I mean, that gives you a context as to why he could have been eating the biscuits at that stage. Yeah. Now, once David was seen taking the biscuits into his cell, he got locked up in his cell, and then some of the correctional officers basically said, you've got to stop, stuffing your face with biscuits because it's going to create a medical emergency. Oh. And David refused to give up the biscuits. So they called in the IAT, which is the Immediate Action Team, which is like the riot squad, effectively. Yeah. Now, you would imagine that the logical thing to do would be to go in, if they were going to call this heavy-duty riot squad in, someone hold David while the biscuits were removed from the cell, and that would have been the solution, right? But instead, they went for David, they applied force on him, and because they deemed it a medical emergency, and it was not clear to me whether they had actually consulted at this stage with Justice Health people who were, this is the psychiatric ward, by the way, of Long Bay Hospital that we're talking about. And it was not clear to me whether they had consulted with Justice Health. But they deemed it a medical emergency, and they deemed that he needed to be moved to another cell with observational cameras. This was the reason why they wanted to move him. So basically, they go in the cell, instead of removing the biscuits, they go in with full force, apply that force on David, and hold him down on the bed and basically put handcuffs on him whilst he's in the prone position. Now, the other thing, just to backtrack for a moment, is that they said that they gave David a chance to comply. That was to put his hands through the cell door slat and have his hands handcuffed by the correctional officers. Now, get this. You've got someone who's agitated. You've got someone who's diagnosed with psychosis. He's in a stress state. Yep. And so their de-escalation techniques, I found out, consisted of two, what they call proclamation orders, which last about 30 seconds to a minute, where they basically say, comply and put your hands through the slat door so we can handcuff him. Right. Now, I'm not sure that someone who's in an agitated and psychotic state will quite process a proclamation. and comply with the proclamation. Now, the other interesting thing that came out was that they had the option at that stage, before they went in and went for David, to actually call in an Aboriginal liaison officer who's got culturally appropriate techniques to de-escalate a situation, and that option was never taken up.
Isn't that part of the Royal Commission?
Well, exactly. And this is, what Aboriginal people have been saying time and again. Those 339 recommendations, hardly any of them have been implemented.
No.
Hardly any are followed through in practice. And this is another instance.
Yeah, because you've got your accountability to proper health assistance, and isn't that part of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, the recommendations?
Absolutely. And also, if you couldn't get an Aboriginal liaison officer, you could have got, I would have imagined, a psychiatric nurse or doctor to come in and, again, de-escalate the situation because they've got professional counselling techniques. Now, the other thing that really was interesting and quite shocking was that none of these immediate action team officers were briefed beforehand about the really serious medical conditions that David was suffering, including his diabetes, his asthma, and his chronic psychosis. Now, all of these put him at risk to, what came out as the sort of alleged reason as to why he died, and that was a positional asphyxia, because he suffocated effectively. And I know you and your listeners know the terrible cries that David called repeatedly whilst he was being forcibly extracted from one cell to the other, and that was, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And it becomes increasingly desperate because his head is being held in a prone position. He's being flattened down to the floor, either on the cell bed or on the cell floor. And there's also evidence that he bled at some stage, and there was blood on the cell floor. So that gives you an indication of the force that had been applied.
Absolutely, and in fact, there's quite a bit of information on public record where apparently an endocrinologist was questioned, and he was saying that removing the biscuits would not be a medical emergency.
That's exactly right, and so this is where you get contradictions coming through, and the endocrinologist and plus another doctor came out and said, look, this was not a medical emergency. And when David was calling out, "I can't breathe," by the way, one of the specialists who gave expert evidence came out and said, look, when people are on the verge of positional asphyxia, they can still speak even as they're suffocating, because the guards were repeatedly saying to David's desperate cries of "I can't breathe," they were saying quite point blank, if you can breathe, if you can talk, you can breathe.
How ignorant.
And this expert witness said, well, actually, people who are on the verge of dying can still talk, but they're losing their breath.
Yeah.
And this is what happened with David.
Yeah, because that death could have been prevented, Joseph.
There were breaches of duty of care up and down the line.
Yeah, even I'm just having a look here, the eating of the biscuits and the possibility that it would raise his blood sugar levels.
Yeah. Now, on top of that, when they finally realised, they managed to violently remove him from cell 71 to cell 77, which was the observational cell with the cameras.
Yeah.
David then collapsed, and they went into a panic. And what ensued was really quite shocking to watch, precisely because they didn't offer proper life support practices to David. And again, that expert witness put on record that he noticed that there was an 8-minute hiatus where David should have been given cardiac massage, and he went for 8 minutes without cardiac massage. And there were incompetent things, which again were on the public record because they've been reported by the media, where they put a vacuum pump supposedly to sort of suck out vomit from David's mouth because he'd been gagging, and they put the pump in with a full cap, and the cap actually fell out of David's mouth.
For God's
so
sake.
You can see the level of medical incompetence that really just aggravated the situation that led to David's death.
For heaven's sake, he didn't even get like CPR, did he?
No. And so, I mean, when you watch that part of the film, it was really harrowing because you know David's going to die, but you see the extent of just incompetent practice unfolding before your eyes. And the expert witness, the medical witness, basically said that they should have had a team leader to organise and coordinate the effort, and no one actually took charge. So there was a level of really gross incompetence unfolding.
So was there a medical team in there, Joseph?
David's death.
What was the last bit?
There were, there were nurses. There were nurses, and then finally a doctor arrived.
Oh.
And then the ambulance. But by that stage, it was too late.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Joseph. You just answered my question. I was just about to ask you, was there a medical team? It doesn't actually sound like there was much of a medical team there. You know?
No. I mean, from my position when I watched that video, it looked like a dreadful shambles. People were in a panic. They realised that a line had been crossed, and then they went into panic mode, effectively, because they never took seriously David's cries. And if I can say this to you, I do want to put this on record.
Sure.
And it was a harrowing. They actually showed the CCTV and handheld camera footage of the last few minutes of David's life. Now, it's important forensic footage because it gives graphic testimony of all the malpractices and breaches of duty of care that we've talked about. But it's also incredibly harrowing to have the family watch and re-watch on a daily basis because they're seeing their son and family member die. But what really came through and continues to haunt me, really, is that as you watch the full arc of this film, this footage that goes for about 10 minutes, you hear the shift in desperation in the actual voice of David, where he pleads, then he gets more desperate and cries out, and then you can hear really like a fear in his voice. I think David knew he was dying at that point because he couldn't breathe. And the voice just shifts to a completely different register. And I just find it unbelievable that people who were dealing with him at that stage could not hear the level of fear and desperation in David's voice because he knew he was dying.
It's despicable, really. And so he passed, and the inquest is resuming next year in 2019. Just getting back to the medical incompetency here, I'm just having a look here at some of the dispatches, and it says you say in here it also showed Mr. Dungay being incorrectly placed 3 times in the recovery position, when according to Professor Brown, who was an expert witness, he should have been kept on his back while constant cardiac massage and CPR were administered. Now, I don't mean to sound repetitive here, but I wanted to reiterate to listeners that that's just not acceptable, is it?
Absolutely not. I mean, you're effectively blocking the respiratory passages when you're putting them in that recovery position, but also the most important thing that Professor Brown stressed was that at that stage, all the attention should have been on cardiac massage, so that should never have stopped. And as I mentioned, every time they put him into recovery position, that would create another hiatus where he wasn't getting that cardiac massage to keep his heart pumping. Yeah. So you can see a cluster of, breaches of duty of care in terms of either uninformed, medical practice. They should have known this. They didn't. They were in a panic. But the end result is that everything was uncoordinated. No one listened to what David was saying because I think there was that racialised dimension where they were dismissing an Aboriginal person's serious cries about their physical health condition, as they did with Ms. Du when she was stuck in the wheelchair. And the end result is that this young man dies at age 26, effectively.
Absolutely, and it's quite surreal, Joseph, the way you were explaining it in your dispatches. I don't think you realise how powerful those dispatches are on that website. Are we allowed to actually say the website on air at the end of this or not?
Oh,
or is that
absolutely.
confidential?
No, we'd really like your listeners to access them. And let me say that the colleagues that I'm working on, Sundini Pereira and Michelle Bowie, have just completed the dispatches on the Fazal Chenegi inquest that occurred in Perth and finished up last week.
Okay.
That they can see, because you're going to be having the refugee and asylum seeker activists, how these two issues speak to each other.
Absolutely.
Across these different sites. So I'd be more than happy to give them the website.
Okay, but before we do, what's interesting here is that you say in the dispatch here, at every relevant stopping of the video, Mr. Downing would call to his legal assistant, "Time, please," so that a time signature was recorded of the scene in question. And you said that resonated with you long after that court finished and all the family had left. Can you talk about that very briefly?
I can. I think there were a number of things that unsettled me. As I said to you before, that video footage is incredibly important because it graphically shows what happened to David in unvarnished terms. But on the other hand, it was really troubling too, the way in which, and I have to put this on record again, the law objectifies the violence that it examines. And for me, the repeated freeze framing of David in his death throes, in his agony, became really unsettling in the end because it was like I called it sectioning off the Aboriginal body, and we know that there's a long history of this detached, scientific, forensic, legal dealing with the Indigenous body. That goes back a few hundred years in terms of how whites have dealt with Indigenous bodies, both living and dead.
Flora and fauna.
That resonated for me.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's this whole objective, scientific, legal objectifying of someone's trauma, effectively. And that time, please, it became like a haunting call for me because by the end, I'd heard that so many times. I just wanted the video to stop, and I just wanted to actually be given the time to reverse the whole sorry process that I'd been witnessed in terms of what had impacted so unjustly on David and David's body. So I actually write about time, please, as a plea to stop the process and reverse and dismantle the system of racialised punishment that in particular is focused on Indigenous inmates and Indigenous people.
So, and Joseph, thank you so much for coming onto the program. I know that Ray Jackson would be very proud that you've come here on this show because he used to come onto this show all the time and talk about inquests like this in a lot of detail. So thank you very much indeed. And I'm wondering if you could just give us the website, the Deathscape website for listeners.
Sure, it's quite simple. Your audience members just need to type in Deathscapes, DEATHSCAPES.org, and you'll get to the site.
Yeah, it talks about asylum seekers and refugees and a lot of deaths in custody. And in fact, it's I wanted to tell you that the website's very text-based, very, very friendly for people with literacy skills and that haven't got much literacy, or for blind and vision impaired people. So I just wanted to give you that feedback.
Oh, look, that's wonderful to know because we were hoping to make it, disability friendly for people who have any, difficulties. So that's really useful feedback. Thank you, Marissa. I'll give that back to our colleagues because we made an effort with that and put in a lot of pictures too for people as another way of conveying information. So the pictures just aren't illustrative. They're also another way of conveying important information.
The pictures, though, it's very important to actually put tags on those pictures to describe what they are so that then the text will be more effective and it'll be blind friendly as well.
Okay, so a bit more detailed description on the pictures in terms of text?
Yeah.
That's useful feedback.
That's useful.
Thank you, Marissa. We'll take that on board.
Yeah, because that way the site will be more accessible. Joseph, we've run out of time. We're going to interview Chris Breen shortly from the Refugee Action Collective. But Joseph, it's been lovely to have you, and I'm hoping we can have you back for future updates. Thanks so much.
Sure. Thank you, Marissa, and thank you, Peter. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah. And take care. And thanks for letting us know that you're a member of ISJA, because we all wear different hats. Half the time we don't know what hats we're wearing, isn't it?
Sure. Yeah, no problem at all. All the best then.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. And that was Joseph Pugliese speaking about Aboriginal deaths in custody, in particular focusing on the David Dungay inquest that he's just attended and which has been disgustingly kept on hold and is resuming in 2019 without any findings at all being handed down.
We will not negotiate with minor state of title government or anyone on our culture, on our land. You know, if people say, oh, you're going to finish up with nothing, well then so be it. But at least our hearts will tell us that we did not sell out our country and our culture and heritage for a few scungy dollars.
Subscribe to 3CR so that your dollars support Indigenous voices and the struggle for land justice.
For Aboriginal people, the greatest grief of all is seeing the country destroyed. And somewhere along the line, we have to realise that we don't actually have the right to do that, that nothing we've ever done has given us the right to do that. Now, you know where I stand on this, because I'm so simple-minded. I think we've just got to admit that this is an Aboriginal country. Just do it.
And you're back with the Doing Time show, and that was Archie Roach called Took the Children Away. It's approximately 4:36 and we're speaking now with Chris Breen from the Refugee Action Collective about a recent protest. Hello Chris, welcome to the program.
Hello Marissa, thanks for having me on.
Lovely to have you, and Peter and I are both in the studio today. So Chris, could you just start off by giving us some background and giving a little bit of a report back about the recent protest at Qantas and Jetstar offices, and just talk about what's happened?
Okay, we had a protest 4 o'clock last Thursday afternoon. There's probably about 50 of us outside the front of Qantas, Jetstar's corporate office, and we were calling on Qantas and all airlines to refuse to deport asylum seekers to danger. In particular, we're concerned at the moment about the case of Priya and Nardes and their family, and the case of Hwin and her family.
Tamil asylum seekers, I believe.
Part of... Yes, I'll explain their cases.
Go on, yep.
Part of the rationale is there's the Home to Billawila campaign, which is supporting Priya and Nardes, who are 2 Tamil asylum seekers who lived and worked in the small rural town of Billawila in Queensland for 4 years and are now facing deportation to danger in Sri Lanka. That campaign put out a petition calling on Qantas and other airlines not to fly deportations. That was signed 13,000 times. The actual petition for Priya and Nardes has been signed 120,000 times, calling on them to stay here and be brought home to Billawila rather than sent away. And also there have been cases of airlines internationally. So Virgin in the United Kingdom recently announced that it was going to defy the UK government and not deport people of the Windrush generation, although it hasn't made the same announcement here. In the United States, there are 4 airlines that refuse to fly family separations, and in defying Trump. And in Germany, Lufthansa pilots refused 222 times to fly asylum seekers to danger. So we're saying that Qantas, it's time to stand up. Forced deportations are a brutal process, often involving physical and chemical restraints. And the deportations might be forced, but the participation in the airlines is voluntary. So obviously we're calling on Peter Dutton to use his powers to intervene in these cases, but also on Qantas. That people associate Qantas with holidays. It shouldn't be associated. Well, it is associated with human rights abuses now as well. If it's going to do these things.
Absolutely, but they're not complying at this stage. I mean, they're not saying
they're not complying. We got a letter back from Jetstar saying that they don't fly people internationally, although we also want domestic journeys which are in preparation, like from Melbourne to Darwin before going overseas. We don't want forced journeys there either. And I should say a little bit about the case of Huyen as well, who is a Vietnamese asylum seeker who came here by boat, and she's from the Catholic minority in Vietnam. And Catholic asylum seekers who've been returned by Australia, we know, have been jailed and beaten and harassed, despite assurances that wouldn't happen. They are a persecuted minority. And she's married here to her husband Paul, who's here on a 457 visa. They have a child between them who was born in detention in Australia, Isabella. And Huyen, if she is deported to Vietnam, essentially faces indefinite separation from her daughter, who has the right to, remain with her, with the father, has his visa status here. It's, a horrific case. People rightly, outraged about Trump's family separations in the United States, but it has been happening here for quite some time as well.
So, just to clarify, Chris, so having a look at Priya, so why... So are both parents being deported? No, one parent's being deported.
No, in the case of Priya and Nardes, one parent is being deported, but they are a family unit. And if they were deported, it's likely the whole family would go. They've got two children, Kopika and Tharunika, who were also born here.
So the ones that were born here, get deported as well? No.
The children would have the visa status of their parents.
Okay.
So yes, they would get deported as well.
And what's happened now? Has anyone been deported yet?
Nobody has been deported yet. So at the moment, Priya and Nardes have their next court case. It's scheduled for the 27th of August. We're worried that there's nothing to hold them here after that. And I believe that court case is still largely about 75% of Priya's initial interview was missing, and so it's about the legal arguments around that. And Huyen has a court case scheduled for October. And again, after that, there is nothing to hold her here. So, we're all urging, people who are listening to, please sign and share the petitions. You put your name down via our Facebook or our website to get in if you want to be alerted about any emergency protests around deportations. We are very much hoping it won't come to that. But that's why we're calling on both, Qantas and all airlines that they shouldn't participate in such things. It was only a couple weeks ago that United Nations, the UNHCR Special Rapporteur in Sri Lanka, mentioned that the use of torture is routine. Went through a list of horrific tortures, and I'm not going to repeat now. And Nardes had links to the Tamil Tigers, as most people living in the north do, and is at risk if returned.
Well, that's right. I mean, there is that she would be tortured, wouldn't she?
It's certainly a possibility.
So with Huyen, she would then face indefinite separation from her daughter and husband if she was deported.
That is correct, because they would not have any right to go to Vietnam as a matter of course. She would have to get I don't know the Vietnam visa system. The Australian one is difficult enough for families to try and get reunification. So yes, they would face indefinite separation.
And where are they at the moment?
Huyen is in Broadmeadows, the MITA Immigration Detention Centre, along with her daughter Isabella. Paul, who works here, goes and visits them every night between 6 and 8 after work, and he says that 2 hours isn't enough, and he's not even allowed to bring cooked food; it has to be packaged food. They're both in Melbourne. They're all, Priya and Nardes and their children, they're in detention as well. They've been in detention now approaching a year, which is cruel. It doesn't have to happen while the court cases take place, is the other thing.
It sounds to me as though the Australian government, including Dutton, really has no regard for families staying together.
No, they don't. I mean, the irony is it's the conservative side of politics that bleats the loudest about, family values, but they are the ones who are tearing families apart. And refugee families deserve the same rights as all families.
What a mess. Like, some in detention, some in the community. I mean, what's going on here, Chris?
It's the politics of it. The Liberals are... Coalition government is, trailing in the polls. And they've doubled down, I think, on scapegoating, on racism. We've seen the same sort of stuff around the hysteria about African gangs. I should say that it didn't work for them in the recent by-elections. Dutton, they did all the robocalls about, the people smugglers and boats will come back, and they lost the by-elections anyway. But that currently is their strategy.
It is a very, very violent infrastructural strategy.
It is indeed. It's cruel, and we certainly think that it must be stopped. In the absence of the coalition government agreeing to do that, we do think that the airlines can play a role. Other airlines overseas have refused to participate in deportations. To give you an idea of how horrific deportations can be, there was a man, Jimmy Mbenga, in the UK who was suffocated to death in 2010 on a British Airways flight when he tried to resist his deportation. What? In Australia, there was a Sudanese asylum seeker who ripped the seat from its bolts as he was trying to get out. It's not safe for passengers. It's not safe for asylum seekers.
And this took place on a plane with a plane full of people?
This took place on a plane full of people, yes. There was a lot of legal action over the British one of, people suffering trauma as a result of witnessing the guy die on the plane.
Well,
which obviously is traumatic for the guy himself, but yes.
People better start going onto the RAC website and educating themselves and, not voting for Liberal.
Please do. We're all volunteers at RAC. We're always looking for more people to get involved. We meet this evening at 6:30 at the Nurses Union building, which is 535 Elizabeth Street. Please come along. Our next big forum is going to be on Wednesday, the 29th of August, also at the Nurses Union building, which is on the case to bring them here about Manus and Nauru. And we've got Aziz live from Manus via Skype, and Senator Nick McKim, who is the Greens immigration and justice spokesperson.
Fantastic. Look, and what's the website there?
It is rac-vic.org. rac-vic.org. Or if you just Google Refugee Action Collective, you'll find us.
And one last question, Chris. In regards to the speakers at the action, at the rally there, who were they?
We had a range of speakers. We had Paul, Huyen's husband, who spoke publicly for the first time. It was a very brave thing to do, given their precarious position. First time I think he's spoken in public anywhere. We also had Awali Ahmed, who is a refugee himself, but he was speaking because he's also an activist and he visits MITA regularly and is a friend of Paul and Huyen. and we had Brad Koth from the Home to Billawheeler campaign, and again visits Priya and Nardes regularly in detention, and we had Umesh from the Tamil Refugee Council.
And I believe there was an action in Sydney as well.
Yes, there was a protest in Sydney as well. We had two apologies. There was Hung Trung from the Greens, who was she was a child of refugees who came by boat from Vietnam. She's now a Greens MP, and she sent us a really good speech, even though she couldn't make it on the day.
Well, just to reiterate to listeners that it's really important to sign the petition and to make sure that the airlines have a no deportation policy, because at the moment it's not written in policy, is it, Chris?
No, it's not. And I mean, Qantas has flown deportations in the past. There was the passenger, Jasmine Pilbara, who stood up on a flight to prevent the deportation of a Tamil man, and she faced a huge fine. There was another man who stood up on a flight and tried to stop the deportation, and Qantas tried to ban him for life from the airlines. So, Qantas took a stand over same-sex marriage, the right side of the same-sex marriage debate.
Yeah.
So they do take stands about things. They sometimes try and say, oh, it's all too complicated, it's for government. But in that instance, they took a stand, and we're saying that this stand would be equally popular if they took such a stand.
Absolutely, and in fact, the Doing Time show did interview Jasmine, I believe last year sometime, about that court case.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for coming onto the program, and, if people want to get along to that meeting tonight or every Monday night, they can go to... Can you give us the address again and the location, please, Chris?
The address is 535 Elizabeth Street. It's ANMF, the Nurses Union building, ANMF House.
At 6:30?
Just opposite the Vic Markets, just north of the Vic Markets. Sorry.
Thanks for your time, Chris.
At 6:30.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Keep up the good work.
Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye. And that was Chris Breen from the Refugee Action Collective. We've interviewed quite a few activists from that collective, and I find them really excellent in terms of looking at the issues. So, we're nearing the end of our show. It's approximately 4:52. I'm just going to go with an announcement, and we'll be back soon.
Help 3CR support the rights of Indigenous Australians.
They mean to save our culture and save our dreams, our footprints, dreams, our songline, and keep our culture going strong.
Of course, a lot of the Aboriginals, having been stolen, were put into state care, and also others.
Recognition of what our people have been through in the last 200 years, the recognition of our culture in the last 40,000 years, and the recognition of where we are heading into the future.
Welcome to Survival Day, Invasion Day. 223 years ago, the white man landed on our shores.
Subscribe to 3CR and help keep Indigenous voices on air. Call us on 94198377 or visit 3cr.org.au. Subscribe now.
And you're back with the Doing Time show. It's approximately 4:53 and we've got a couple of minutes left. We wanted to thank Joseph Pugliese for coming on to the show, and he spoke about Aboriginal deaths in custody and David Dungay, and we also paid tribute a little bit to Miss Dew as well, and that was a continuation of last week. And then we heard an interview with Chris Breen from the Refugee Action Collective, and he spoke about the brutal forced deportation of asylum seekers and refugees and the importance of supporting and trying to convince the airlines to do a deportation-free policy. So going to be saying goodbye very soon, and we've got a couple of minutes left. We're going to be going out with our theme song Black Fella White Fella by the Rumpy Band pretty soon, with Beyond Zero coming up next. And just wanted to quickly mention Radiothon again. Radiothon happened in June, and we still haven't met our general target completely, and got to do a bit of work, but we're getting there. And for anybody that hasn't paid their pledges, please do so now. thanking everybody who has paid, but it's still not too late to donate. So yeah, see if that can happen. It's approximately 4:54, and rock up if you can to the meetings every Monday night at the Refugee Action Collective, for the Refugee Action Collective, and that's at Elizabeth Street in the city. And just Google refugees and asylum seekers and you'll find the website for that. All right, well, we're out of here very, very soon. We've got Beyond Zero up next, and we'll be now playing Black Fella, White Fella. And it's goodbye from Marissa.
See you, everyone. Have a good night.
Yeah, see you next week. Stay strong and take care of each other. And stay tuned every Monday from 4 till 5 for the Doing Time show. Take care.
Bye.